Hey pals, I'm Optimistic Duelist and this is Homestuck Explained. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Kernelsprites and how they tempt the reader to indulge in their most childlike fantasies. In doing so, they allow not just for a fully customizable and unique world for each game, but also for a fully customizable personal, emotional connection to the game. Mechanically, Kernelsprites are blank slate entities that can absorb up to 2 objects, an action referred to as prototyping. A Kernelsprite imbued with a clown takes on a vaguely clownish aesthetic, and one prototyped with a bird acts like a bird. If prototyped once, the kernel starts making attempts to communicate with the players and aid them in escaping the meteor heading towards them during the tutorial. Hopefully the player is successful and enters the game. From here, the Kernelsprite's functions can be broken down into 2 distinct hyperflexible systems, the kernel and the sprite. Let's tackle the kernel first. Immediately upon reaching the post-entry phase, the kernel undergoes a hatching, where whatever data it absorbed is transmitted to both the kingdoms at war in Spurb. Both kingdoms then adopt the traits of said kernel. If a clown, all the enemies will dress up in clown-themed attire. These effects stack with each player's kernel and combine randomly in each individual enemy. So if one prototypes a clown with a damaged eye, a cat with tentacles for arms, and a bird with a sword through its chest, they would have to contend with enemies who contain random assortments of the following traits. Potentially blind in one eye, but also equipped with wings, claws, tentacles, and even swords to fight with. What this provides is player-determined, scalable, modular difficulty that allows for any given game session to contain basically any kind of enemies imaginable, and that can inform all sorts of things about the story of the session, from what challenges each group will have to face, to the tactics that both sides can employ, to the very look and feel of the conflict. Like medieval stuff or Lovecraftian horror or the look of a particular video game, or, well, basically anything you can think of? Want it in your game? Boom, go for it, it's yours. That pretty much covers the kernels, except for one small detail. Only prototyping the kernel once will still evolve all the enemies and the world state to its next stage, so the second prototyping is technically redundant in this sense. This means with a little planning, one can essentially prototype pretty much whatever they want. This is important when discussing the second hyperflexible system contained in this game mechanic, the thing left behind once the kernel leaves, the sprite. As I mentioned in our episode on Spurb, the sprite is essentially the helper character on the player's hero's journey. The sprite can act as literal backup, providing extra manpower, but their main role is to act as an informant and guide on the player's adventure, guiding them through both game mechanics and their growth to heroism. But perhaps their most immediate use in the game is as a different sort of guide, less active an agent in guiding the hero. This guide is more like the simple, wordless tutorials typically employed by the best of games as they teach you their mechanics. Even in its early form, the Kernelsprite acts as an understated incentive, guiding the players to their goals not through spoken language, but through the language of desire. In a sense, the sprite is a sort of wish-granting system, one tailored to grant very specific kinds of wishes that require miracles. This is a trade-off, a freebie the game offers the players as consolation for the fact that their entire planet got obliterated, because Homestuck is a story that begins with the apocalypse. Spurb always ends up obliterating the planet it gets played on with meteors, and millions of sessions of Spurb start independently on April 13th, which means the kids Homestuck is about are not the only kids playing. Earth is doomed whether this particular group escapes or not, and so they have no real choice but to keep playing. It's true that a sprite can theoretically be prototyped with anything, but at this point I should put forward the game's one caveat, that the sprite shows an unusual attraction towards the dead or the soon-to-be dead. This little wrinkle turns a simple game mechanic into a compellingly emotional narrative tool, one that the comic leverages to visceral effect in 2 equally fantastical ways, with at least one more implied circumstantially. The first is the impossible promise of resurrection. In Shadow of the Colossus, we see a magnificently rendered inversion of the hero's journey where the protagonist sacrifices their humanity and very existence in order to achieve one simple, impossible goal, to bring back the loved one they have lost. In Homestuck, the very first character to play Spurb accidentally jumps his long-lost grandma's ashes in the thing and he gets to meet her for the first time as a spooky clown ghost. Because Homestuck aims to make a statement about life, it also deals with the reality of loss. And the promise of undoing some of that loss is an immediately captivating one because it is a desire almost all people have had in one way or another. Homestuck doesn't stop at these sentimentalities, simply barreling forward with its endlessly complicated story, but it does use them to full effect, and then leaves the openness of this mechanic there, tantalizingly inviting to the self-projecting reader. If you don't quite believe this is intentional yet, consider the second impossible wish this mechanic allows. This is the implied one. Do you have a favorite character from a movie or a game? One whose dialogue you liked a lot? One whose values spoke to you? Who's to say you can't just throw a poster of them into the Kernelsprite, suddenly making them real? We see other not real things become real in the story. And Skaian already grants animals the ability to talk, even though that should be impossible too. In fact, things do get thrown in there that are technically inanimate, even if they have personalities and can talk. Look, just don't question it, alright? We're not ready for the artificial intelligence stuff yet. I'll explain later, let's just take this a step at a time. For now, I'll just suggest that the Kernelsprite is less concerned with the object thrown into it than it is with the idea thrown in. I'll defend this point more fully in our video on alchemy, so I'll just ask you to withhold judgment until then. Being patient with me about this should be easy to do, because Homestuck only plays up this suggestion of impossible childhood wish fulfillment later into its narrative. Add a couple of other game mechanics we don't need to understand right now to the mix, and you can add self-prototyping to the list of potential concepts in the game's tool belt. One character uses this mechanic in order to literally become a furry, an internet subculture she was always interested in, and several others see different versions of themselves turned into sprites in one way or another as well. These sprite variations have a habit of becoming both incredibly confident and decadently flashy, in ways that reflect back onto the original version themselves. In the paraphrased words of Isaac Triangles, I'm trying to figure out why I like Dave Petta so much. Part of it is the juiced up wish fulfillment of it all, which feels like a very deliberate gesture. Dave Petta looks like someone's OC because they are a perfected being, the very thing you want as filtered through the native symbol language of MS Paint adventures. This is what an angel looks like in Comic Sans. It's also the end of Dave's character arc in a way, a situation in which Dave is able to delight in himself. Surely that's the major problem of his character solved, right? And it couldn't happen to the real Dave, because that kind of solution doesn't happen to real people. You don't wake up one day and decide that you love yourself. Magic is required. If this were really a video game and these kids genuinely gained all the levels, these are what the results would be: the highest selves of 13-year-old trauma victims. These sprites are teenaged, like the main characters their character arcs originate from, but they also kind of transcend the process of aging itself, which the main characters have to do in a more regular human sort of way. It's not a mistake that these versions of the characters end up being almost universally more romantically confident as well. The sprites taken to this conceptual endpoint represent the same kind of impossible fantasy the more mundane revival of lost loved ones does. It is a denial of the very rules of life that make us unhappy. Whether that is subverting the rules of death and bringing our loved ones back to us, or subverting the rules of propriety, self-seriousness, and even decent character design and be as gaudy and bright and colorful and obnoxiously furry or weird as we want to be, and not just to assert that we deserve to exist, but to be proud of the hilarious, self-indulgent reality of our existence. It is, in a sense, an invitation to be shameless, or more specifically, to imagine we can free ourselves from the social burdens and expectations that, in real life, are inescapable. To preserve what we care about and keep grief at bay, or else to become such an empowered and self-satisfied version of ourselves that nothing can truly hurt us anymore. The kernel represents the ability to theme the fantasy of the outside world that this journey will be played out on, the ability to decide what is real in this new world. The sprite represents an opportunity to have a wish granted, to put something absolutely impossible suddenly within reach. You don't have to use the sprite to think about a pet you've lost that you could bring back, or about what you would look like if you would imagine yourself as perfect, obviously. You can choose to think about it as a simple game mechanic to whatever extent you think about playing Spurb yourself. But because Homestuck toys with the idea, taking it to the most self-indulgent extremes possible, it's a lot easier to buy into being playful about using it. All that's left for the reader is to muster the drive to be creative and to have the willingness to indulge themselves in whatever fantasy they want to imagine. And hey, it's not like they can be more shameless than Homestuck itself is at it. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. And please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to let others know about what we're doing here. If you really think this work is valuable, you can also join the divine crowd of beings known as my patrons, which will give you a vote on what order videos come up in, and give you access to a Discord server where we can talk about this and other cool Homestuck concepts. Higher reward tiers allow you to invite friends into the server, get you access to drafts of my work, and even let you sneak peeks at videos from a few days to a week in advance of publishing. See you again soon, everyone. Until then, keep rising.